Well, hi, Kat. Welcome to the Author Revolution podcast. I am so glad that you're here today. Obviously, I've
Thank you
clued
for
my
having
audience in a little bit about how we met and how this conversation came to be. But
me.
can you tell my audience a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Yes, of course. I'm Kat Caldwell, Catherine. Yeah. I was named after Katharine Hepburn, but my mother spelled it wrong. So that has, followed me all my life. Always wanted to be like her, didn't quite end up like her. I mostly grew up in Wisconsin, so we were almost neighbors growing up, probably.
Yeah.
I now live in DC with my husband and 3 children and a dog. And whoever knows, they're trying to get me to get a cat. So that's what I do. That's me in a nutshell.
That's awesome. Well, obviously, it's not just you in a nutshell because you do a lot of other things like write
Oh,
books
sure.
and talk about books and help the author community. So let's
Mhm.
talk about your author journey to start with.
Yeah.
Like, what has that looked like for you? Did you always know that you wanted to be a writer, or how did
Yeah.
that come about?
I did, except that, I'm an 80s kid. So my grandparents and my parents patted me on the head and were like, yeah, but for a real job, what?
Yes.
You know. So I started writing my first book in high school by 2000. Oh gosh, we're going backwards. Like 2003 or so. Self-publishing was still not a thing. It wasn't, I mean, it was a thing, but it wasn't really looked upon. So I thought I knew stuff. I'm in college, I know things. So I'm not going to go with self-publishing. I didn't have the money. So I found Publish America, which I thought looked awesome and had, my stepdad look over the contract and he was like, looks good to me. If anyone knows what Publish America is, it was like a scam.
Oh
Basically.
no.
It was a scam. It's what, people would call a poor hybrid. So they didn't do any editing. The book covers were terrible. They claimed that you would make money, that you'd be able to get it into a bookshop. I took it into the university bookstore and they were like, we don't understand this barcode. Like our computer system won't take it. They were willing to take our book. And then of course people kept coming and were like, the formatting's weird. So anyway,
Oh
all
no.
that to say it was a big bust. I was so proud of myself and here I am, I'm going to be this literary person. I imagined myself in New York City, like, literary New Yorker.
Absolutely.
Yes, all busted up. So I kept, with the dream, but I got married, moved to Spain. My husband's from Spain, and did translation because it still was in my head that I had to have a real job. And then babies came and all that, and kept writing. But it wasn't until probably 2013 with a newborn third child, I was like, I'm
Yep.
going to do this. We seem to get desperate. We're like babies crying and we're like,
Yeah. Like I need to find me again. It's got to be
yes,
here somewhere.
yes.
Yes.
So I started writing my book. It was a long time. It was, I left the other one behind. I had tried off and on to like sell it and couldn't find really what I needed was like a mentor. That's what I needed to like, what is wrong with it? I don't know. How do you do this query letter thing? Like, what's wrong with my query letter? I don't understand why I keep getting these rejections, um,
Sure.
keep in mind, like the internet was not that great. We had writersdigest.com, I think. And, I had the big old query letter books that I would lug over to Spain.
Right.
And,
I remember those. Oh,
right.
geez.
Like the next year you have to buy the other one. It's like $50.
Right. They were not cheap.
They were not cheap.
And there were a few of them. I can't remember if it was the query letter ones, but there was like an agent one too.
Yes.
It was almost like a phone book for agents.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
You're
I
like
remember that.
highlighting,
Hmm.
what is women's fiction? I don't know. Just the
Yeah.
information industry was not as up to date, So it took me about 4 years of writing and moving back to the States and figuring out how this whole industry works that I finally decided I was going to self-publish in 2017. And then once I hit publish, I was like, I still don't know what I'm doing.
I don't think anyone does when they first
Yes.
hit that publish button.
Like, what is going on here? I didn't expect it to be a bestseller, but I did have to recognize that like my confidence wasn't really up there yet. I didn't have a lot of feedback on it except for people around me who would read it and let me know. and most of my friends are pretty honest, but they're still your friends. Like they're not going to tell
Yeah.
you if they hate it. Like, you can tell
Well, I don't
them
know.
the
I have a
first.
couple of friends that were pretty brutal.
Well, some of them like are afraid to read the book, because they don't
Yeah.
want to have to say if they, um, but I spent 2018 then just trying to figure out how to run a business, because that's what I realized. This is a business. I need to figure that out. I did a lot of business books, read a lot of business books, did, a couple masterminds, things like that. Came out with my next book in 2019. I did not write a series. Then I figured out another thing that I didn't
Next on
do
the
well.
agenda.
Yes. So then I get, I spoke with one of the guys at Reedsy, and he was like, you should write a series. Like, what?
Yep. Why did
Back
no
to the
one tell
drawing
me
board.
these things?
Yes. So, it's like, I think, like a lot of people, it's doing one thing and seeing that you need to learn another. And so in the meantime, you're always writing.
Yeah.
But
And always growing.
You're learning and you're coming out, and then COVID hit.
Oh,
How is that already a thing? That's 2 years went by. So I came out with another book, but always writing. The biggest thing that I found was like, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I couldn't find people who could tell me, especially being in Europe. You're not in the States where we have a lot of local writing things, right? But
sure.
I was in Spain and France, and not a lot of people were writing around me. And so I couldn't find it. And online forums, you just go down a rabbit hole. And it was just, that's what I wanted. I wanted a community where I could find that. And, once you start creating something, you start seeing it everywhere.
Sure.
Like,
yeah. That's big law of attraction.
Right,
like energies
yes.
are drawn to like energies. So all of a sudden you get to see it everywhere. It's like when you have a new car you want to get, and all of a sudden you see it everywhere.
You should buy it,
Yeah.
So I really took to like, I need to find this community. I need to figure out how to build this community. And so first part of COVID, I was just with different masterminds of like, how did you build your community, whether it was writing or otherwise. And then I launched my community, because it's like, what we need as writers is a place to ask questions, a place to be like, I tried this and it didn't work. Can you read this for me? Why do I keep writing goodbye with a dash? I don't know. Is that right? I don't know. How do you spell gray? I have no idea.
Right.
Like all these weird things. How do you market
or blonde?
it?
That's another one. Yeah.
Why is there an E, not an E? I don't know. So that's what I did. I came out with the community. What year is this? 2021. So beginning of 2021.
Nice.
And just little by little, we have a great community. We talk about writing all the time.
That's fantastic.
That's my favorite part. So we keep going with it. We have sprints. We have talks. I don't know everything, and I don't ever pretend to know everything. So I have people coming in all the time. Editors, how do you look at your stuff through an editor's eye? Why are they saying these things? What does show don't tell mean? I don't know.
Right.
Explain this to me. People who know how to market better than us, something's going right for them. All these things. There's so many things to know. So many.
That's fantastic. Now your community is on your website. Now, is this part of the one that's a membership where people come in through the membership? That's so cool.
Yeah. I tried a couple things before that, where I tried free things on Facebook. And the problem was nobody took it seriously. It was just, people wouldn't show up. I would show up with an expert and nobody would come.
Sure.
So the membership, they find it on the website. We do most of the things in Slack. So it's not related at all to Facebook, because there are lots of people who don't want to be on Facebook.
Yeah, and absolutely.
We don't want distractions. So, you know how you get on Facebook and you're like, I'm only going to look here.
Yes.
And that never happens. So
that's why I use Buffer.
Exactly. Or is that just me? No. It's completely separate. We do it on Slack. We're actually looking at Discord now, because you can have video inside Discord, which is very exciting.
I think you can do it in Slack as well now. I've seen like them
have like multiple.
Yeah, I think so. I think they're starting to implement it. Maybe it's just in beta. I'm not quite sure, but I think you can now.
Probably trying to keep up with Discord,
Probably. Yes, absolutely.
So we actually meet a lot on Zoom, and I know everyone's kind of tired of Zoom, but the community is from all over the States and Canada. and Spain. Now that I'm thinking of it, look at that, we're international.
That's awesome.
So yeah, we get on and we actually write together. So I don't know if if you've ever done sprints before with other people. I think sprinting works really well. I used to do it by myself, where I would set a timer and be like, I will not look at my phone for 15 minutes.
Yes, absolutely.
When I was addicted to my phone, whatever habit I want to break, I sort of do that. So I thought, well, I'll do it with my writing, because if you have kids, you just use whatever time you have.
Absolutely.
And so I implemented that during COVID. And that was kind of the first thing of like, let's get together and write. We started out 3 times a week, and now we meet 8 times a week.
Wow.
So 20 hours of sprints a week. You can show up whenever you want. But it's just on Zoom. And it's weird how it works. Just psychologically, you walk into the room and you're like, I might as well write because everyone else is writing.
Heck yeah. Well, it's that whole energy too of like being able to say, okay, guys, family, whoever is outside my door, I have a meeting I'm going to, don't interrupt me. And it's so much easier to like, you're on a call. They can see you're on a call. You know what I mean? And they have to stay out. And so it's just easier then to focus because of the fact that you've got that energy of the writership going. It's really cool. Even the Zoom meetings, they're phenomenal.
Yes. And I know you talk a lot about mindset, and that I think mindset wise, it's easier to tell your family I'm in a meeting than it is to say, I need to go write now for some reason. And I hope that we get to that point where I need to go write means, carries that weight. But if you need that excuse, I'm in a meeting, you can see I'm in a meeting. There are other people here. Please don't interrupt for 1 hour. Give me 1 hour.
Yep. I do that a lot with my youngest son. He's the only one that kind of interrupts, and I will not so much meeting anymore, but I'll say, I'm in the middle of writing my chapter. So when I'm done with this chapter, yes, we can go play, or yes, I can get you whatever it is you're asking for. But as you can see, I'm still writing this chapter. And so he always is like, how's the chapter going? Like, yes, how many words I left? So it's cute because he is associating the writing part of it. Like, this is work, this is still work, but this is the chapter. So when I'm done with this chapter, then you can interrupt.
Then you implement math. You're like, if my chapters are 300 and
yes.
words, he's like, oh no, never mind, mom. See you later.
Yeah, I gotta go. Although he is my math kid, so I don't know. He might be. Yeah, he might start doing the work, so it might not be good.
You can give him your launch plan. Be like, how many days you left, and what percentage is that, hun?
Yeah, right. Give me the ideal date to launch based off of these parameters.
Yes. You never know.
He'll become my Stephen Hawking or something. Oh my gosh.
That'd be awesome.
Wouldn't it? Oh, he loves science and space, so you never know. Crazier things.
Researcher.
Yes.
We'll research this.
Absolutely. Oh gosh. So how many books do you have published now? How many are out?
So I have 3 books published and 1 novella. Of course, in the middle of, after I heard about writing a series, and
now you have new plans.
Yes, I was like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. That first, like, oh yeah, he does know what he's talking about. Okay, so I wrote a novella for my first one, and am working on. I'm one of those. I'm not a series reader, and so I hop around a lot. So I have one story that I'm going to finish, and I'm sort of outlining the second historical romance as I finish this contemporary. So I'm like,
that's
back
cool.
and forth. I'm trying to focus, but yes, it'll probably be like a mini series, so going see the Friends story.
Cool.
But yes, they have a point. Books that connect.
That is awesome. Now, I did notice on your website that you say that you don't write in genres, but you do write good stories. So how do your stories typically come to you? Like what interests you enough, or do you get inspired, or do you go, I'd really like to write a book about XYZ? How do they come to you?
Yeah, that's funny. So like the first one, I'm really interested in people. I used to make up stories about people whenever I was a kid. So Wisconsin, big family. My stepdad at that time was like Irish, 8 kids. So you get like so many cousins that you get lost among people.
Yes, same.
Us Northerners are like, where are the children? I don't know.
Yes, there's like bazillion of them. And then when you leave the house, you're like, gosh, why is it so quiet? It feels
Yes.
weird. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. My mom was Erin Patricia O'Connor was her maiden name. So I feel yeah, it was Irish family with bazillion cousins everywhere all the time.
Yep. Yep. And you only go home if you're bleeding, you know.
Yeah. Right. And I was usually the one under the willow tree with the book going, she's in the house. She's in the
I saw
house.
that. Exactly. So I was that kid too. Like I
Yeah.
know where everyone is. I know, and I'm making up stories about everyone. I also would read books, like whatever, you know, there was no Amazon and books were expensive and we didn't live near a library. So whatever I could get my hands on. And a lot of them were my grandparents' books. So for
Sure.
visiting one grandparent or another. And some of them were like not very good, well written. I didn't like the ending. So I would write the ending. I would write a new one
Nice.
for them. Like,
That's cool.
I don't like this, you know. So it's really more about people to me. I'm very interested in people's. I should have studied psychology, but I wasn't smart enough to understand that. So a lot of times it's like, what would happen if this person got into this situation? You know, for the first book, Stepping Across the Desert, I like history, so I was reading about the Barbary pirates because I found out that so Don Quixote, the guy that Cervantes, who wrote it, he was taken by the pirates because Europe used to no one used to live on the coast because pirates would come up and just kidnap you
Oh
and
my
take
gosh.
you because it's the 1600s. This is what we do. And so I was like, that's really strange, and so the Catholic Church would pay ransom and the Anglican Church was like, no, thanks for taking our people off of our hands.
Oh my
So I
gosh.
thought, yeah, isn't this terrible? So that's kind of where it starts, what would happen if somebody, a woman got in North Africa, like how would she get home? And so, it never follows exactly how you're imagining it from that very moment.
Yeah.
But that was the seed of it. So I sort of go like that, like what would happen if we do this, and I don't know, I guess a person comes to me and then I have to figure out a story around that
Cool.
person. Yeah.
I know Stephen King is very similar to that. I mean, not so much around the people, but like the question.
Yeah.
He's talked about that, how like his stories will come based off of how would you react if XYZ happened, if your pets came back to life, or if you were trapped in the mist, or, it's that there's always that inciting incident and everything else goes from there for him. So it's very similar, except you start with the character. That's really cool.
Yeah, but you have to find that inciting incident and that can take a while. So with this new one that I'm working on, it started with what would happen if two brothers were in a band and like the day before their big concert, like they're finally going to make it, one brother just doesn't show up. And of course that's like kind of where it starts. And then you have to figure out like, why isn't he showing up? Why is this other brother, And so it really kind of moves from that. And sometimes the story turns out completely different. So one of my issues then is finding that inciting incident, which I wish Stephen King would give me some download.
Maybe it helps when you start with the inciting incident and work your way backward.
Yes, so you can fill in the people, So,
yeah.
If anyone has inciting incidences, let me know.
Right. Oh my gosh. So is that your biggest struggle as an author, or what is your biggest struggle so far as an author, as you're kind of working through the process and trying to figure out your method?
Yeah, I think part of it is the inciting incident. Part of it is I'm okay with reading really long books and not everyone else is. And I'm kind of a classics girl. You can't write like the classics anymore. Nobody cares what the wall looks like nobody cares about the wallpaper, so I had to really learn that, like all these details that I like or might enjoy, other people don't, and that it's really about the change of the person. And so figuring out why are they deciding to do these things and what is then going to cause them change, and then finding an incident that makes sense to force them to change. So for a while I would struggle with there's a difference between storytelling and an anecdote, because you can tell like a story at the dinner table in which you are expressing yourself through your emotions and your body language, and it's it's coming across to people sad or funny or like what just happened, shocking. And a lot of times you don't have to finish your sentences, and you don't even have to really finish the story. And so I was like, but that's not a story, a book, And so I would for a few years, it wasn't difficult to figure out Stepping Across the Desert, because it's a romance. And so they have to sort of figure out, leaving their baggage behind. And I knew that with that one, I wanted to talk about, even if your past is pretty bad, you can look at it in such a way of, I wouldn't be here in this good spot if I hadn't gone through that bad spot. Because
Absolutely.
if I had just stayed where I was, I wouldn't have met you, so that was kind of
Yeah.
the idea. So I have to find that, what do I want to say with this book? And then how can I stick to that as I'm writing? Because I tend to go off on rabbit trails.
Are you a pantser or a plotter?
I am a pantser. And so I
Aha.
am learning to plot. I am learning to plot. So my second book was a bit of a low fantasy book. It just sort of like it started out as a short story and sort of just came to me. And so I didn't need to plot it as much. But I'm learning that I could save a lot of time if I would learn to plot. So I really like Lisa Crone's Blueprint, learning sort of that way of plotting, because I've tried just plotting out ideas. And because I don't know all the incidences, I know more the character.
Yeah.
I kind of like Lisa Crone's way of doing it. So Story Genius is a great book to learn that with. But that's probably my biggest issue, is if it doesn't download immediately, it could take 5 years to write the book, and I don't want it to take 5 years. So
Absolutely. Yeah, it takes some excavation sometimes, and just kind of digging around and poking holes at it and just playing with it. And and if you're a pantser, sometimes if you don't get all those insights and you're not quite in the, I don't know if the vibe is the right word, but kind of, if you're not in that zone of understanding what's happening with the characters, it's hard to catch that trail of it and run with it. I could see
yes,
that.
yes.
Absolutely.
Or you kind of write the same scene 3 times. I have to go back
Sure.
and read,
Yep.
because I am very disciplined and I write every single day. But like you
Yeah.
said, you might not always have that moment in which you're really in the character. And so the Blueprint is helping me with that. But still sometimes, if I'm not feeling it or getting interrupted a lot, I'll come back and be like, that's basically the same scene, just with another person, like, delete, and learning that deleting's okay.
Yeah.
That was a struggle. Now it's a little bit easier. So
Yeah, it's a little bit painful when you're like, oh my gosh, it just acts 2,000 words. But yeah, if it's necessary and it moves the flow of the characters forward and moves the story forward, I get it. There have been many times, especially when I'm writing from 2 different perspectives, where you start thinking, I'm going to write it from this character's perspective, and you get like halfway through and you're like, this just isn't jiving. I don't know why. And then you try switching to the other character, and all of a sudden it flows fine. And you're like, okay, that's
all right,
why.
I just wasted 2 days.
Great. I love when that happens.
It's hard, especially when you like use word count as a way to measure something. I mean, whatever motivates you. And I like watching all my words stacking up, but I just found that it made it more difficult to take away what to delete what didn't need to be there. So I had to stop that.
Sure. That's a good point. Absolutely. Yep. I think for me, the biggest motivator is when there's a deadline ahead, and I'm focusing more on chapters than word count per se.
Yeah.
So but I am a plotter at this point. I'm kind of a hybrid, but I still plot enough that I feel pretty secure in the writing as I'm going forward. So for me, it's more about like, okay, I got chapter 8 done today. Thank God, that sort of thing. Where in the past, when it was more word count based, especially like during the NaNoWriMos, it would definitely be a blow if it was at that scene where you're going, oh crap, now I got to take out all these words and start over. Yeah, absolutely. Now I've seen too that you also create journals and writing prompts. So what inspired you to start those?
Well, part of that was probably as a young mom, I've always journaled. I really think it's good for you mentally. Um, I also think that we have a lot of stories to tell. So I remember so we lived in France at the time with 3 children, wherever they were. I just remember sitting in my bedroom thinking like, I should journal. I don't have anything to say. And I look back on that, like, I think a lot of us have felt like that at some point. And I really think that we all have stories to tell. Um, my grandmother is passed now, but the older I got, the more I wanted to hear her stories. Like, where did you grow up? How did you grow up? How did you deal with that? Like, what was it like to be a young woman and there's a war coming? And she lived in the South. So she lived in Texas, right on the border. So she knew different cultures. But then Japanese men came in, and to her, that was a whole different culture,
Yeah.
like not Japanese, sorry, Chinese. Um, and she said they kept like putting a dime in, or a nickel, I guess it would be, and the Coke bottle would come down, and then they just set the Coke bottle aside and they put in another, because they just wanted to watch the machine,
Yeah.
and like her just observing this. So you start asking them stories, and I realized, what she thought was not that big of a deal, to me in the sort of more modern age was just fascinating and a fun story to hear. And how did you meet grandpa? And you're from
Yeah.
like 3 different states away. And so I know that we have stories to tell, but it's hard to look at a blank page and think like, I there's nothing special about me, like, I think we just all go through that. And so I wanted to help people not feel like that. It's really important to me for people to understand that they have stories to tell, that most of the stories we write are just retelling stories that have been lived, at some point.
I love that.
So I started with writing prompts. I did a few in COVID, just coming out with like PDFs of writing prompts. And then I created a hardcover journal that has 36 prompts, but they're kind of really looking into when's the last time you got angry? Did you have, were you correct? Were you right? What would you tell the person now? Like, having a space to be able to say that. How did you meet your significant other? What's your favorite recipe now? What are you watching now? Like, documenting who you are in this moment. And it's interesting because I was thinking, as we usually do, like the audience would be somebody like me, mid 30s at the time, 40s, whatever. And I've actually had a lot more response from older women who are realizing that they have stories to tell, and it's helping
Yeah.
them remember these stories, which is
Oh, I
really
love
fun.
that.
Yeah,
That's
I
so
love it too.
cool.
It's good.
That is so cool. I love when that happens, especially when maybe they weren't even writers to begin with. And all of a
Mhm.
sudden they realize, oh my gosh, I love this process. And I love being able to tell those stories in a way that is well received. Because I think most, like you said, most of the time it's like they have these really fascinating ways of dealing with things. And if you already have this interest in history or in understanding how people are, now all of a sudden you mix those two together and you've got just this fascinating like visual in your head of like, how
Yeah.
did this work? I love that.
Yeah. And you have the separation of time. Think of our mothers and our grandmothers. They lived through some crazy times, especially as females,
Right.
and we're living through some crazy times. And so maybe we don't look at it now because we're just in the midst, but I think 20 years from now, we'll be like, huh,
Like, that was
here's
a
some
weird time.
stories
Do you
I feel
remember that?
comfortable. Yeah. What was it like to homeschool your kids when there was COVID, mom? Like, what happened? Like, what was that like?
Well,
We
do you
probably
see
won't
why
think
why
much
these
of it.
pictures are bald? There might be a
Wow.
reason there. I don't know.
I don't know what.
Oh goodness, but I completely agree with you. Yes. What do you love most about your writing process? Like about being an author in general? Do you love the exploration of it? Or what is it that draws you to it?
Oh gosh. I think I have a lot of thoughts in my head. So I think one of the great ways to get rid of them and to not let them go, make you crazy, is to get them out. But I do think it also helps you understand society, for me, like understand why people are doing things. Um, not that I understand everything, because that's definitely not true, but I like sitting down and thinking. It usually take a person that I've seen, or an action that I've seen, and I can put it to somebody and I can think, okay, why would they act like that? Being now in DC, a Wisconsin girl from a town of 2,000 people, is just like, this is so different here. So
Yeah,
why
I
do
bet.
people behave the way that they do? Why are they so obsessed with going like to high schools that are so expensive? instead of, it's easy to mock each other. It's easy to, we know this, where if you're ever on Twitter, that's sort of how we're becoming as a society. But the truth is, like, people do things for a reason, and most people are pretty normal and pretty nice. And so, all right, why would they do it? And so for me, it's like a process of figuring that out, and how would they react? And I think that's why we read stories. Why would somebody act like this? All the myths are like, and you should behave because otherwise the dragon will eat you, obviously.
Right.
So
Duh.
it's kind of like, you should go to high school and this is why. And so people have a reason for that. So I like that exploration. And I think I've always been sort of in my head. So getting the people out on my head and sharing that with people is fun. Learning about storytelling, I think, is fun. It's just sort of, the more I do it, the more I like it. I like seeing it come alive on the page, and realizing that you're creating this character, that's not perfect, but is enjoyable to follow. And I don't know. I just really like being in that moment where you can see the person moving and you're just trying to get it out as quickly as possible,
I do too. I love that as well. It's so much fun. And to know that you're like the conduit kind of for whatever it is that they're going to do, whatever crazy things they're going to say, whatever is going to end up happening. It's just such a thrill to be in that moment. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yep.
And to know that you're not actually, a godlike figure. Like, they will not do.
Oh yeah.
You're trying to force them to do, and like, they won't do it. And that's so weird.
Yeah. It's like, you're not a kid. What are you doing?
Yes. It's like, no, I'm the writer, and yeah, the character won't do it. And so it's a fascinating process to be like, that went a completely different way than I thought it was going to go.
Right. I've had that happen so many times. Or like, I'll be writing a different book and another character's like, hello, don't forget about me. We got to do this thing. And you're like, no, like, you're 2 books from now, go away.
That's so frustrating when they do that. Hello, I'm right here, knock knock. Like, I only have 24 hours a day. Okay.
Right. I cannot clone my brain as of yet. So wait a second.
If only we could.
Oh gosh, if we could clone ourselves, that would be frightening.
Yes.
Wow. Oh, okay. So I have right. I have noticed, obviously, over the past couple of years here, that you host a Pencils and Lipsticks podcast. Pencil and Lipstick. There we go. Podcast. So before we talk about the podcast itself, I got to ask you though, how did that name come about? Because I don't know that I've ever caught that.
So I was with a friend of mine. So I was, it's 2019, and he was sort of trying to figure out his, where he wanted to take his business, or, he wanted to create a business. And he was a hairstylist at the time. Don't worry, this goes somewhere. He's doing my hair, and he's like, I really want them to create this podcast because I have all these ideas for this podcast for hairstylists, and because he wanted to, like, teach hairstylists that it was more than just hair. I was like, I'm going to steal that idea. Okay, what would it be like? And so we're brainstorming. Okay, what would I do for a podcast? I'm a writer. It's 2019. So I was coming out with my second book and the journal. It's like, all right, well, I still have a lot to learn. I'm realizing, how to get the book in front of people. I'm doing all the book funnel things. All right, what about a podcast? And I realized I'm a bit of an introvert, because as writers sometimes are. I'm pretty cool with asking people questions if it's within a context of something.
Sure.
I'm not going to just call you up and be like, how did you do this? But I could get you on a podcast.
Sure.
So he's like, yeah, but you need a really good name, Kat Caldwell podcast. And I was like, I don't like that at all. That doesn't sound right. Like, what would talk about books? And so we're brainstorming a lot. And I came in with really bright red lipstick on, and he was like, if you get your pencil and your lipstick. And I was like, I'm gonna call it Pencils and Lipstick. And he actually hated the name. He was like, no, you cannot call it that. No one will understand it. I was like, I'm gonna do it. So,
heck yeah. Oh, that's epic. I love that so much. Oh, I love when names come about that are like that, where it's just this unusual, unique way to be able to merge them together. And it's like, it's just perfect though, because it encompasses the energy and authenticity of who you are. So I think that's just so amazing. That's so cool. And I love that he hated it because it's like, see how it's
no
doing
good.
now.
No good at all. I was like, well, too bad.
I love it. And I love that you stuck to your guns, that you were like, nope, this is it. That was the right one. I love that.
I'm not very good at titles, but I was like, no, I think that's good.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. It's okay now. I feel complete with that. It's awesome. I love that. Yep. So when it comes to the podcast itself, then how is it different from other writing podcasts? And like, what, I guess, called you to actually create it then? Was it because of your friend doing one for the hairstylist, or was there something that was kind of playing at you before then?
I had been listening to podcasts. I really like the medium, especially as, you know, my kids are older now, but as a mom, like, oh my gosh, we moved to Dallas and you live in the car. And it's interesting enough, like in 2015, you paid for streaming, you know, like your data would get used up really quickly. It's crazy how things change so fast.
Yeah.
So podcasts you could download, that you could delete. So I really loved the medium. And so 2019 early, we're talking about it. How would I do it? How would I figure it out? And my brother's an artist. And so what I was realizing trying to figure out my business was that I could learn a lot from small business owners, but they were not creative business owners. So there was a difference and there was something lacking. And I was like, okay, that's great that that's how you sell whatever, but I sell books, you know, like, and they said, no, it's the same thing. I said, no, it's really not. Like, there's something lacking. And I didn't know what it was. I don't have a business degree, you know, my husband does, but he's always working. And he was like, I don't know, whatever.
You're like, you're so helpful, dear.
I love you, honey. No. So I was like, I just need to ask people. I need to figure this out. There are forums, yes, but a lot of times you get really snarky remarks from like, why don't you know that already? Well, I don't know.
Because osmosis stopped working for me a while ago.
Yes. I cannot read your thoughts from a country away. So I actually put it out on some forum, writing forum I was on in Facebook. Like, if I started a podcast, would anyone want to come on? David Rawlings from Australia was like, I'll come on. How about next Monday? And I was like, oh,
well. That's going to be fast. Let's do it. I don't know what's happening right now.
That tends to be what I do. So that's what I did. And at first I did anybody who is doing a creative business. How can we help each other out? There's a collaboration between it. And part of that was just to get people on the show and learning. And so it was a lot of authors, but it was a lot of other creatives like muralists and artists. I had some fantastic people on there. Were very interesting to listen to, but I realized like about a year and a half ago, a little bit less than that, that I was getting more and more writers. And really what I was more interested in was writing. And at first I thought, well, there's lots of writing podcasts out there. But I think what's different about mine is I don't have a specialty more than I find myself being like the middle woman. I can get that person and I can get the audience and then they can talk.
That is so cool.
Yeah. So I see myself more as that. I don't have, you know, like Writers Inc. Those guys know a lot. You know a lot about mindset and things like that. You have a lot of teaching that you can do solo. And I do a lot more interviews because I'm fascinated by a lot of things. And ask me weird things about Cervantes getting kidnapped, and I could probably tell you, but not everyone wants to know about that. You know?
Then those people don't listen to that podcast episode. It's fine.
Why are we talking about this? So I love learning from other people. How did you do it? And I think a lot of it is asking questions. So that's what I do. How did you come up with this? How did you get it? I just had somebody writing a memoir and it's like, that sounds really hard just mentally. How did you deal with the criticism? People have opinions about you. You know, so we talk about that. And so that's a bit what's different. We might talk about people's books, but we talk more about the journey and the questions that other people have and then what they have to offer. Because a lot of people have amazing groups, amazing coaching, amazing products. And we need to be connected with them. And I think
absolutely.
You might have a mindset group and somebody else might have a mindset group, and you're going to connect with some people and they'll connect with other people, you know, and there's enough people in the world. to connect
Absolutely.
everyone. So,
And you can be connected to more than one group.
oh, for sure.
It's
I
like,
am.
right? Same. It's like being a reader. It's you can read more than one author's books and enjoy all of them. And so it's that same process of I don't really think any of us, especially in the creative industry, we're not really in competition with one another because we're all doing things just a little bit differently and they all enhance everything that everyone does.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yes. I agree. I agree. And there's writing coaching. We can always learn writing. I mean, I was that young person that thought, well, I have a talent, like 20-year-old. I know how to write a book. I just finished a book. So obviously I know everything. So I definitely have that
Obviously, because don't
attitude.
all like young adults? I'm pretty sure they do.
I wrote one book. I know what I'm doing. And, you become more humble as you get older. You're like, actually, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I didn't know that. Crap.
Yes. Yes.
I totally
It's
get
good, those
that.
stages.
So
Um,
you've got a course called Prompted. So obviously you have this love about um the prompts and being able to do the writing sprints. So which
mhm.
came first? Was it the membership or was it the course that came first?
So the membership came first. See, I have a hard time focusing. I might be, yes, I have a very hard time focusing. So I think was doing it all at the same time. Um, I realized that, I was doing sprints. I was doing free sprints and they were prompted. And so that's kind of how I just grew my audience. Like, I'm willing to be here having this prompt and we're going to sprint to it. And I like prompts. I think they're really fun. Just, you know, I look around me and I try to think, like, this guy was in Dallas, had a mannequin's head on his antenna, you know.
Like
It's like,
what?
that looks really dystopian. Like, okay, what is going on here? And so I wrote a little flash fiction about, instead of Roman soldiers with their spears, like, they're in these cars with heads on sticks. I don't know. I think I was
I
watching
love it.
Vikings at the time. So I was like, well, look at that. um but I love, I think people's, sometimes you get trapped by your own brain. You need like
Yeah.
another prompt. Story a Day has great prompts. She has like decades of prompts, a decade of prompts on her blog. um so I thought, people liked that, and I okay, I'll do a course about it, and it just took me a while. And in the meantime, I realized in the membership group, everyone had their own project. So we're all writers, we all have a book we want to finish, and so using the time to work on our project was more beneficial than
Okay.
constantly having prompts for them. And so I sort of
Sure.
diverged that, just make that into a course that people can find. It's 28 prompts. So, I mean, 28 days, but you can do it whenever you want. And then the group is really more about coming in with whatever you want to write. Um, I mean, there's no, you can write your blog if you want to. Sometimes we write our newsletters. So
Yeah.
they did diverge a little bit that way.
That's really cool though. I love that because I don't think there's a lot of courses out there when it comes to being prompted and like how the concept of sprints and prompts can really, like you said, help you get out of your like the box your brain kind of gets put in because we
Mhm.
kind of get into these habits of like how we view the world or how we think our writing should work or all of those things. So sometimes just having that number one, the opportunity to sprint because that helps you stop the internal editor and all of the other things that go along with not sprinting, but having the opportunity to write about something that isn't even tied to maybe what you're already planning on writing or whatever, that gives you the opportunity to open those doors and kind of travel down some of those side quests, so to
Yes.
speak, where you're learning something new about your style of writing or how you want to write, or maybe it gives you a different idea for the story that you're already writing that you would never have thought of before.
Yes, it's weird how our brain works. So if you get a prompt, I mean, the videos might be 3 to 4 minutes max of me just explaining what it is. Um,
Yeah.
I think one of them is like a birthday party, and I give something about it. And it's weird how your brain can focus right then on that one thing. And
Yeah.
for 15 minutes, you just write, and you might just leave it in your journal. It's just fun. Maybe use some new vocabulary or whatever. And some of them are like, try to write it as pompous as possible, just change the voice up a little bit. um But like you said, all of a sudden after that 15 minutes, you might be like, oh, I know exactly what my protagonist has to do.
Yeah.
It's
Isn't
just
it
that
weird when you
moment.
think about it that you're a pantser where you could be technically like if you viewed your outline and did like let's say a chapter by chapter synopsis, that could be each chapter could be your prompt so
Yeah.
that your brain could focus and
Yes.
then go
Yep.
off on your sprint. Isn't
Yep.
that interesting?
Yes. And wouldn't it be fun to have like an extra thing if you say, okay, but today we're going to start out, I'm going to write it, this is going to happen, but I'm going to write it from this character's point of view. And then I'll rewrite it. Cause I mean, I think we're
Yeah.
so consumed with like getting our books out there so quickly that sometimes we don't have fun with it. And so like, or
Yes.
do it from the first person's point of view. If you write in third person or vice versa, you get to use that. Your readers will want that. Like, would you like this scene from the 5-year-old's point of view? Like, yeah, of course I want that
Yeah.
scene.
I've actually broken the mold a little bit with this new series that I'm doing right now. Similarly, like that with Accidental Alpha, I have everything from like I'm used to writing in first person present tense because I like the immediacy of it
Yeah,
and I like the unreliable narrator aspect of it.
right.
But when I switched to the male perspective, to Stone's perspective, I use third person past tense because I
Ooh,
wanted like just that shift. I wanted it to be enough of a jolt that it's different. And so, but it's fun for me because now I'm getting to play in a different style of writing that I don't normally write in. So
yes,
it's kind of flexing that muscle and I'll admit it takes longer to write those scenes, but it's fun to do because I don't normally write like that. So it's
yes,
neat.
yes. And Lisa Crone actually says to write some of your backstory in the first person if you write in third person. So I write third person past. And so I did that and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And it's it's not going to necessarily go in the book like that, but
Yeah.
it helped me understand the character. Now it's in my head, it's developed. And yeah, I mean, you just hand it out as, extra content to your readers, and that's always fun.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's so cool. Okay, so where can my audience go to find out more about you, about your podcast, your membership, your course? Where do they go in order to learn all the good fun stuff?
All the fun stuff. They can go to Kat Caldwell with a Kat Caldwell.com. It pretty much has everything there. I hope to organize that website a little bit, but it probably won't go down ever.
So don't get your hopes up, guys. Just start digging.
It's there.
There is also Google, or go to my show notes and you can find everything there as well.
Yes. I mean, I'm on all the social media. I'm mostly on Instagram, but yeah, Kat Caldwell has everything, the courses, the membership. If they want, specific questions, they can DM me on Twitter or Instagram. They can sign up for my newsletter there. I answer all the replies. But if you want to just try it, you get 2 weeks free. You can come in, you can sprint for 2 weeks. We have marketing masterminds on Fridays. You can see if it's for you,
That is
and
so cool.
no strings attached.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I'm so glad that you were able to take the time and tell us all about all the awesome things that you were doing. I know I personally love your podcast and I love all the different like aspects that you're doing. I didn't realize about the courses and or the course and the membership until I was digging around a little bit for this though, which is super weird because I'm like, how did I miss this before? But I'm
So
so
many.
glad that you're able to be here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Carissa.